The situation in Rafah is dire. The recent escalation of violence has resulted in a humanitarian crisis, drawing sharp condemnation from the international community. Hospitals are overwhelmed, and civilian casualties are mounting. The recent events have brought the already precarious situation in Gaza to a boiling point. The international community is grappling with how to respond to the escalating crisis. The United Nations has called for an immediate ceasefire, citing the worsening humanitarian situation. International aid organizations are struggling to provide relief to those affected by the violence. The fragile peace that had been in place is shattered, replaced by fear and uncertainty. The world watches with bated breath, hoping for a swift resolution to the crisis. The conflict has also exacerbated tensions between Israel and its neighbors. The international community is urging both sides to show restraint and work towards a peaceful solution. The situation remains volatile, with the potential for further escalation. The world is holding its breath, hoping for a diplomatic solution to prevent further bloodshed. The crisis in Rafah is a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict. It highlights the urgent need for a just and lasting peace in the region. The international community must work together to find a solution that addresses the root causes of the conflict. The future of the region hangs in the balance. The Biden administration is facing growing pressure to take a more decisive stance on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The recent events in Rafah have tested the limits of U.S. support for Israel. President Biden has spoken with both Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. He urged both leaders to de-escalate the situation and protect civilians. The U.S. has also called for an independent investigation into the civilian casualties in Rafah. This call has been met with resistance from Israel, which insists it is only targeting military objectives. The U.S. finds itself walking a tightrope, trying to balance its support for Israel with its commitment to human rights. The situation presents a significant foreign policy challenge for the Biden administration. Some Democrats in Congress are calling for a reassessment of U.S. aid to Israel. They argue that unconditional support for Israel is no longer tenable in light of the ongoing conflict. The Biden administration has so far resisted these calls, reiterating its commitment to Israel's security. However, the pressure from within his own party is likely to grow if the situation does not improve. The crisis in Rafah has exposed the deep divisions within the Democratic Party on the issue of Israel. It has also highlighted the challenges facing the Biden administration in navigating the complexities of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The situation remains fluid, and it remains to be seen how the U.S. will ultimately respond. Israel maintains that its actions in Rafah are necessary to defend itself against Hamas rocket attacks. The Israeli government accuses Hamas of using civilians as human shields. It insists that it takes all possible precautions to avoid civilian casualties. Israel has also rejected calls for an international investigation, claiming it has the right to investigate itself. However, the high number of civilian casualties has fueled international outrage and condemnation. Israel's response has been criticized as disproportionate by many in the international community. The UN Human Rights Council has announced its intention to launch an investigation into possible war crimes. This has further strained relations between Israel and the international community. Israel is also facing mounting pressure from the United States, its closest ally. While the U.S. has traditionally been unwavering in its support, the Biden administration has expressed concern over the civilian casualties. This has led to some speculation that the U.S. might be reevaluating its relationship with Israel. However, the U.S. has so far resisted calls to take concrete action, such as imposing sanctions. Israel is caught between its security concerns and the need to maintain its international standing. The government is under pressure to find a way to stop the rocket attacks while minimizing civilian casualties. The situation is complex with no easy solutions. The coming days will be crucial in determining the future direction of the conflict. Section 4. The world reacts. Chorus of concern. Calls for restraint amplify. The international community has reacted with a mixture of condemnation and concern to the escalating violence in Rafah. The UN Security Council has held multiple emergency meetings to discuss the situation. However, attempts to issue a joint statement have been repeatedly blocked by the United States, which cites Israel's right to defend itself. The lack of a unified response from the Security Council has been criticized by many, who see it as further evidence of the body's ineffectiveness in dealing with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The European Union has called for an immediate ceasefire and urged both sides to show restraint. Several European countries have also summoned their Israeli ambassadors to express their concern over the civilian casualties in Gaza. The Arab League has condemned Israel's actions as war crimes and called for an end to the aggression against the Palestinian people. The organization has also called for an international investigation into the situation in Rafah. The violence in Rafah has once again highlighted the deep divisions within the international community on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It has also underscored the limitations of international organizations in resolving such complex and intractable conflicts. The world is watching anxiously to see how the situation unfolds and whether a diplomatic solution can be found to prevent further bloodshed. The crisis in Rafah has also sparked protests around the world. Thousands of people have taken to the streets in major cities across Europe, North America, and the Middle East to express their solidarity with the Palestinian people. The protests have been largely peaceful, though there have been some clashes with police reported in a few cities. The scale and intensity of the protests highlight the growing global outrage over the situation in Gaza and the plight of the Palestinian people. Section 5. Shifting Sands, a fractured alliance, uncertain future for U.S.-Israel ties. The escalating violence in Rafah has placed a significant strain on the U.S.-Israel relationship. The Biden administration, while reaffirming its commitment to Israel's security, has expressed increasing discomfort with the civilian casualties in Gaza. This has led to some speculation about a potential shift in U.S. policy towards the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Some analysts believe that the U.S. is growing weary of the conflict and its role as Israel's main backer on the world stage. The situation has also exposed the growing divide between the Democratic Party and Israel. Progressive Democrats have been particularly vocal in their criticism of Israel's actions in Gaza, calling for an end to unconditional U.S. support for the country. This has put pressure on the Biden administration to take a tougher stance on Israel, potentially putting it at odds with the more pro-Israel elements within the Democratic Party in Congress. The crisis in Rafah comes at a time when the U.S. is already re-evaluating its global commitments and priorities. The Biden administration has made it clear that it wants to focus on domestic issues and competition with China. This has led to concerns that the U.S. might be less willing to be drawn into the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in the future, potentially creating a vacuum that other actors in the region could exploit. The future of the U.S.-Israel relationship remains uncertain. While the Biden administration has reaffirmed its commitment to Israel's security, the situation in Rafah has exposed the growing tensions and potential fault lines in the relationship. The coming months and years will be crucial in determining whether the U.S. and Israel can navigate these challenges and maintain their close partnership. Section 6. Towards a solution. A glimmer of hope in the rubble of diplomacy. Despite the grim situation in Rafah, there have been some glimmers of hope for a diplomatic solution. Egypt, which has traditionally played a mediating role between Israel and Hamas, has been engaged in intensive shuttle diplomacy in an effort to broker a ceasefire. Egypt's efforts have been supported by other regional actors, including Qatar and Jordan, who are all acutely aware of the potential for the conflict to spill over into a wider regional conflagration. The international community has also stepped up its efforts to address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. The United Nations has launched an appeal for emergency funding to provide essential supplies and services to the affected population. International aid organizations are working tirelessly to deliver aid to those in need, despite the challenging and dangerous conditions on the ground. However, significant obstacles remain to a lasting solution. Mutual distrust between Israel and Hamas runs deep, and both sides have shown little willingness to compromise on their core demands. The international community will need to exert sustained pressure on both sides to make the necessary concessions for a durable ceasefire and a return to negotiations. The road to peace in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict remains long and arduous. However, the situation in Rafah has injected a sense of urgency and renewed focus on the need for a peaceful resolution. The coming days and weeks will be critical in determining whether diplomacy can prevail or whether the region will slide further into violence and chaos.